My name's J.C. Mccauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Welcome to Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives, and I am Regina Roundtree, your host. This is a special show that we're doing today. We've wanted to take the opportunity to talk with you about a recent report that we released, our post-election report on the 2014 election season that happened here in Connecticut. One of the things that's most important to our organization and the work that we're doing is that we provide a space that we're able to build opportunities and bridges between the Republican Party and the urban community. And in this report, we do an evaluation of what happened and the areas that we really think can be improved upon. If you've not had a chance to download our report, you can find it on our website, www.ctbrac.org. That's www.ctbrac.org. So the first thing that we want to talk about, and you'll see when you look at the report, so we did a few charts gauging the information, or rather the votes that happened, going back from 2002 all the way to 2014. So basically that's 4 election cycles. So we had 02, 06, 2010, and 2014. And we charted the total votes for all the candidates during that time. We did it for the Democrats and the Republicans as well. And so when you go into the report, initially we start talking about the Republicans, but there is an appendix in the back of the report that has a table with kind of complete data, at least for the urban cities that we're targeting. That includes not only the Republican candidates at the time, but the Democrats at that particular time as well. And so in the first chart, what we notice is that going into 2010, there is a huge drop in votes for the Republican candidates and a rise in for the Democrats. And we cross paths, right? Because if we remember in 2002 and 2006, we had Republican candidates, Republican governors. And then when you get into 2010 was when Governor Mccauley was elected. And you can see the huge crossover in votes. And there should be a chart that you can view at this time that's showing for you. What's interesting is there's 90,000 voters that come from somewhere. And we haven't quite figured out where they come from yet. But that would be an interesting story to have at a later time. But there are 90,000 voters that kind of enter the pool and vote, and Governor Mccauley wins by a very close margin of about 6,400 votes. However, in 2014, the spread is wider from almost 28,000 votes. But what's of interest to us, right, with Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives are the urban communities. And so when you look at the graph for the urban communities, and we've identified 10. Kind of the reasons that we chose those 10, there was a combination of, we used the 2010 census, and we took into account the percentage of race and ethnic makeup within a community. We accounted for the total population. We looked at the per capita income. And then we also picked communities where within our group we had some kind of connection or established presence within those communities. And so we came up with the 10, which are Bloomfield, Windsor, and Hartford, Norwich and New London, New Britain, Meriden, Waterbury, New Haven, and Bridgeport. And so when you look at that chart, you'll see that going into 2010 and 2014, the gap is very wide between the Democrat and the Republican votes. When you look at it statewide, it's much smaller, but when you look at it in those particular urban cities, you can definitely see a difference. And that's what concerned us, right? That is even why we started and formed this organization just over a year ago. We felt like the message of conservative principles was not getting into the urban communities, and we felt like that there was a misunderstanding for many reasons. National news that has gone on, the kind of persona from people that are Republicans that sometimes they get attached to the party, and we wanted to combat those. And so as we started out this election year, there was a lot of excitement. We had the press conference for which we did on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, right in the Capitol. So we had that press conference. Then we did a few articles were written about our group. We had our Women on Fire event in March. And then we kind of jumped right into election season and working on campaigns, working with the idea with the party that we were going to take this messaging to the urban communities. And unfortunately, that did not happen. I think that, when we look back 2020 over everything, right, hindsight 2020, there were a lot of areas where there were mistakes. But what we realized going into it, coming out of some of these mistakes, is that there is a need to institutionalize the work that we're trying to do. So kind of a loose kind of group, political action committee, was not going to be enough to cement the ideas, to establish policy work, advocacy, lobbying, all the things that would be needed to really successfully bring the message of conservative principles to audiences that have not embraced them before. And so early in the summer, we kind of realized that we were going to need to institutionalize this work. And coming out of the campaign, we were convinced of it and pretty sure. And so we have started an organization, which you will be hearing more about, called the Civil Rights Institute. It is a nonprofit 501c3. It will have a C4 arm that allows it to do lobbying and advocacy work. And what's important is that it is going to be based in Connecticut. And the work that it will do, that it will focus on as far as conservative values and the implementation of those best practices within urban communities. There are some great organizations that do work now. You have your NAACP, you have your Urban League, but they are definitely, one can say, very much aligned with the Democratic Party. No one hides that anymore. And so how do we have, I'm always about accountability, balance, authenticity, honesty. Where do we have an institution that does the same thing with conservative values in the urban communities, looking at best practices and things that are going to help our community? And so thus the Civil Rights Institute is born. There will be three main areas that we are really going to focus on, and that is crime, in criminal justice reform, the war on drugs, the Second Amendment, right? We really want to discuss that, and race. And race will probably be the first thing, the first project, initiatives, PR campaigns that we'll be working on. And that happened because of some of the things that happened this year during election season. And the biggest one that everyone remembers is the white privilege comment. That was, I think, a pivotal time for our party where we could have, if we had positioned ourselves right, if we had people in leadership that had the understanding to realize that this need not be a reactionary knee-jerk moment, but something that can be embraced and that we can move forward with. And so I think here's a good time to kind of break down and let's talk about white privilege. Let's talk about privilege and what that means. Now, to many people, I've heard many comments about, well, I'm white and I don't have privilege. I don't understand what you mean. And then I've heard from many white people who say, yeah, I have privilege. I understand what you're saying. You're completely right. So let's kind of lay that out. And first, let me backtrack first. For those of you who are not familiar with the white privilege comment, all you need to do is Google my name, Regina Roundtree, and white privilege, and it'll come up. So what happened? We had LG primaries, lieutenant governor. So we had 3 candidates, Penny Bacchiacchi, Heather Summers, David Walker, running for lieutenant governor. So back during the convention, Penny Bacchiacchi is out in the lead, and she eventually did win the nomination at the convention to be, the party choice for the primaries. She was on a radio show, and as they were kind of wrapping up the discussion, you could hear that she was excited about the upcoming convention, but you could also hear that, running a campaign had been taking its toll. And she mentioned that she had been hearing that people within the party were having a problem not thinking that she was the appropriate candidate for her, for the team, for the party, because she was married to a man that was black. Penny Bacchiacchi is white. And I don't think she realized when she said that what would transpire after, but that's what media does, right? We catch on to something, they catch on to something, and it just goes. And so before the show is even over good, it's out now that, Penny Bacchiacchi is alleging that her party is racist. She's making these accusations. And this is the day before the convention, which is, big moment for any party, right? All the candidates are going in looking to get their votes. And so the general sense was, how could Penny take away from everybody else's moment? And I think if we stop right there, when anybody alleges or even states that there is any kind of bad feelings, any kind of ought against something as personal as your family and yourself, I don't know that we should go around accusing necessarily that they are trying to distract from the rest of the party. I think those comments came out because the media came out and started calling the party racist. And let's admit it, we all know that the Republican Party has this stereotype of being a racist organization, being filled with old white men. We know this is not true, but the party has not necessarily done a good job of changing that image, but they're working on it, and they have gotten a lot better. And so going into the convention, there's this whole people are upset. Mostly the people that are upset are the people, I believe, that are totally disconnected from the idea that there is really a difference in America between white and black. And so we go to kind of this whole idea of, well, I don't see color and we're colorblind. And I'd say anybody that calls himself a Republican and says that they don't see color, you ought to question whether or not you're really Republican, because our whole values and principles are about the individual, right? And about appreciating the individual and respecting the individual. So who I am with my color, with my gender, with my ethnicity, that makes up who I am as an individual. So you can't acknowledge my individualness and then strip it away from me and make me like everybody else because you don't want to see color. That seems like an oxymoron a little bit. And I want you to think about that, and when we come back from this break, we're going to get into more details about the white privilege comment.
How do you judge a law firm's success? Cases won, money made, or what the firm does in the community? At Dressler Strickland, we know that success is just the beginning. The true measure of success is what you do with it. For 33 years, we've used our success to help our neighbors and our community. 24/7, 11/22. Whenever you need us, we'll be there. Dressler Strickland, building communities one case at a time.
So we're back, and before the break, I left you with laying out the scenario of how we get to this white privilege comment. So we're at the convention. What ends up happening is that Ms. Bakiaki, what happened then is that the news, if you listen to the actual audio interview that she did, she never identified a particular party. The news picked it up, ran with it, and brought in one of her opponent's names, David Walker. So David was very offended, which he should be, because she never brought in his name, but his name got tied to it. And so now it's as if people in his campaign or him himself is racist and had a problem with Penny being married to a black man. So we get to the convention, there's this bunch of tension, and I think the party took the wrong turn. What they did do was, in the end, Penny came out with an apology with David Walker. They apologized, made it public, and said, let's move on. For those people who understand what it is to be discriminated against for a disability, because of your age, because of your race, because of your ethnicity, right? And so there's a difference between race and ethnicity. And so when we get into ethnicities, we can talk about there's Irish, German, Swiss, Italian, but you have your people from the Caribbean, from Trinidad, from Africa, you have Black Americans, you have your Peruvians from Colombia, from Puerto Rico, from Spain. So there, those are ethnicities. When we do the census, we kind of talk about race: Hispanic, non-Hispanic, white and black. It's kind of where we leave the races at, or mixed and other. So for those people who had heard this, I think there was a sense that we were waiting for the party to rise up and step into this challenge of not trying to push back the fact that there aren't people in the party that would say something like that. Trying to deny that has seemed to be the way that we've tried to combat the stereotype, right? Is to just say it's not true, it's not true. I'm not that way, so it's not true. Which is not very helpful and not very believable, because you don't represent everybody else in the party. So in the same way that you could be an individual who believes that taxes or education should be some way but not another way, you can't then allow that but then not acknowledge that there are people within the party, right, who have a problem with race and ethnicity. I've heard stories from Republicans that have faced discrimination because they're Jewish. But we deny this as if that's not so. And that's usually only the defense of someone who doesn't have a defense, right? Who doesn't have a way to have the conversation or come into the conversation, is just say that's not true and run off the playground. Right? And so, but we can't run off the playground, because as we've seen from the myriad of things that are happening in our country, the issue of race is moving and taking steps forward and more steps forward every day. And so I'm concerned for my party that if we continue on this path of ignoring and not having the conversation, that we, the party, will be irrelevant at some point, because statistics tell us that this country is getting browner. So what do we do? Anyways, back to the white privilege comment. So that had transpired. They had backed it out. Penny ended up winning the nomination for the party at the convention. So now I am working on Penny's campaign, supporting her. And the other two, David Walker and Heather Summers, had enough votes that they could primary her. So they decided to primary And so now we have a three-way. So that means in September, there's going to be a primary runoff, and people are going to have to select who they want to be their lieutenant governor. So it's a couple weeks away from that. Things have kind of settled down. But then we have this candidate, Heather Summers, from the southern part of the state, southeastern part of the state, who brings up the situation that happened with Penny talking about her family, and that, you know, she was upset that people were making comments, and that she apologized, that David Walker accepted it. So Heather Summers decides to use that incident to further her ambition to be lieutenant governor. So this is politics, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with pointing out your opponent's weak spots, right? Where you're a better candidate. That's what you're supposed to do. However, getting into that murky water of talking about racism is not very smart. Especially if you had nothing to do with the comment, but more so, this is a party that has been completely just covered in this whole idea that they are racist, that they are disconnected from the people. I mean, just go back and look at all the post-mortem reports after Mitt Romney lost in 2012. Ad nauseum, there were reports about the party being disconnected, about not understanding, about not having people of color, about not connecting to communities, about not connecting to women. So the idea that you, as someone who is not involved in the controversy, would then, as a white person, bring up and as a weakness of this other white person because she's married to a black individual. And one could say, well, she didn't know. And see, that's part of the problem even within the party, is that there are not enough people of color who are consultants, who are on kitchen cabinets, who work at high levels, who could say, listen, you know what? I can tell you that is not going to ring very well with people of color. But nobody said that to her. And I think this is where my frustration came in. Not only did she put it on mailers, but then she had a radio ad, and then she was on Face the State talking with Dennis House. And the whole tone of condescension about Penny and the whole thing about racism just did not play well at all. And I used the example, someone had said to me, well, it's politics, you can do whatever. I said, okay, so if someone had a child that was disabled and someone in the family, something happened, that child got injured, you mean to tell me you would be okay with an opponent bring up that issue, right, and putting before a broader audience all of the issues with the disabilities and what happened that could possibly bring up old wounds, especially for anybody that had another child that was disabled? And immediately they're like, oh no, you should never do. I'm like, so it's the same thing with racism. However, if you've not experienced it, you don't understand. And that's what prompted me to make the comment that I did on a Facebook page about white privilege. And I accused, and I said some people would accuse Ms. Summers of having or moving within white privilege. Well, that comment was taken out of context. Well, there was a whole post that was just taken out by a blogger, posted up, and the next thing you know is Bakiaki's campaign aide makes racist comments about opponent. And before we even had the opportunity to kind of play this out and listen to see what happens, Penny's campaign, Heather Summers comes out and acknowledges and says Ms. Roundtree should be disavowed. We don't talk about that as Republicans. And then not even 2 or 3 hours later, Bacchiacchi agrees with her and fires me. And so this whole thing plays out, and I am never allowed to come to the public and kind of talk about it. And the party never figures out how to deal with that, right? And so it's kind of left there like there's this big open sore, and all we do is just kind of walk around it because we know it's there. And the whole thing about white privilege, let's break that down. There's nothing racist about that term. The way we define white privilege is that there are people who are white, afforded various privileges and opportunities simply because their skin is white. Which means basically that what we're really saying is that people who are non-white have been denied privileges because we're not white. That doesn't mean that every white person is a racist. That just means that the skin that you've been born into has afforded you privileges that have been denied me because of the skin that I've been born into. And I don't know where we come to have these kind of real conversations about just because you have that privilege doesn't mean you're prejudiced or biased or bigoted, right? It means that with privilege, you are afforded access to the things that come because of power, because of color, because of education, or because of who your parents are, right? So forever, any children of any former president are always going to be afforded a privilege that other people's children will never have. Does that mean that they're racist? Does that mean that they're bigoted? Does that mean that, they look down on other people? No, it just means that they've been afforded certain privileges. So when you look around in the news, when you look around in our community, you cannot deny, and maybe you can, right? If you've not worked in or worked with people of another color than you, it's very possible that you do not understand the privilege that you have because you're white. Does that mean you're a bad person? No, it does not. But that doesn't stop it from existing because you don't know about it. It very much exists. It is very real. And it's something that if you deny, for all the people of color in this world who experience it, when you deny it, it is the same thing as denying that what we've lived are real experiences. And so then we come to this kind of, you're over here saying that white privilege never happens. It's not true. I'm over here when experiencing it for real. And so we have a clash. We come to a parting of ways. So does that mean that we can't go forward as a party and forward as a community? We'll have some more conversation about this when we get back. welcome back. Before the break, breaking down the situation that happened here in Connecticut very publicly about white privilege. And we need to understand that it was not just Connecticut. Like I said, if you Google it, the articles, the news, the op-eds that were written were national. I've gone places out of state and been in a certain conversation. They're like, were you that woman? I'm like, yeah, that was me. And as I realized, right, watching this play out in the news, not saying anything, being different places where people who were really supportive of C-BRAC and what we were doing had now stepped away, right, and had fallen back from it. And, you know, these perceptions that I was race baiting and that I was a racist, right, or that I was calling, you know, we have this 11th rule with the Republicans from Reagan, thou shalt not, you know, insult another Republican, right? That's foolishness, right? It's called bringing accountability. And what the Black community realized is that everything that the Republicans were saying about themselves, that they were not, was absolutely so by the reaction. And if you thought that, okay, we get it, right? People could have been offended by Heather's ads, by the mailers that went out, right, bringing up the issue of racism. But then afterwards, what then happened was, after Penny fired me, then Heather put that on a mailer as well, and that went statewide, because I don't even live in her district, and I got that mailer, you know, mentioning how Bakayaki had to fire an aide. And so what I realized is that the people advising this particular candidate, I mean, I think there was just a whole nother level of arrogance and a whole nother level of, all right, you weren't paying attention to the news at all. And maybe that's what it was. But if you had known the op-eds, the things that went out, how this went nationally, how people were looking at the party and saying, wow, they can't even have a conversation about race without people asking for others to be disavowed and other people getting fired. And then, you know, here is Connecticut GOP, who is the parent of this whole thing. And yes, Connecticut GOP is not responsible for running campaigns. Those are the candidates' jobs. However, nothing came out from them. Nothing was done behind the scenes to try to mitigate this, to try to say, you know what, we know Regina, we know what she's trying to do. You know, let's get a press release out there. Let's just do a press conference to kind of clear the air. Let's bury the hatchet and move on. So that didn't happen, and I'm watching this, and Black people are watching this, right? That here is an individual who is working on messaging to urban communities that Black people, Black and brown people, should give the Republican Party a second chance, another look, should look and see what's new about us and what it is we have to say. Then they watch this happen, and no one, nowhere, anywhere defends the advocate that has been going out on their behalf, trying to tell everyone that this is not how the party is. And so we're like, okay. Then what happens is Miss Summers wins the lieutenant governor race. So she is now the LG candidate. Great. This is now, once again, an opportunity to say, you know what? It was the campaign. I was upset. I was heated. Whatever. Let's work this thing out, because this consultant, this urban consultant, is now representing the party within urban communities. This is what the party has been saying that they wanted to do, wanted to increase the outreach to. Instead, what happens is Ms. Summers comes to the campaign, says that she absolutely refuses to work with the urban consultant, and then the head of the whole ticket supports that. How do you then turn around and go to the urban community and say, we care about you and we're interested, if you cannot deal with the friction or the truth of what has just rubbed against you privately? How do you go out then? And it's important to bring this out simply because the whole rest of the world is watching. And like everybody else is watching. And I think this is where we bump up. It's like, well, I wasn't paying attention and I didn't know. That still doesn't excuse it from not happening. It still doesn't excuse you from being responsible, right? And then again, what I say is, there are many Black Republicans in the state. If you had taken the time to talk to them, ask them their opinion on what had happened, even followed the news on this, you would have realized that we need to make amends. If we are trying to say that we are concerned about the urban community, there's no way that we can let the whole urban strategy be sidelined because an individual comes to the campaign and says, I don't want to work with that person. And not just that I don't want to work with that person, that is the Black person who is representing, doing the outreach to the Black community, who, by the way, called you on the carpet on something, got blown out in the news. You win, and now you come and now you double down on what is clearly now just discrimination. So the bigger part is that nobody in the party had any way of controlling this. No one knew what to say. No one stepped up to realize that if we care about the urban communities and our messaging, we have to fix this. And so that begs the question that I would get, well, maybe Republicans really don't care about the urban communities, because nobody in leadership stepped up to make sure that the strategy and the work and the appearance of what was happening, not only publicly, but semi-privately, was going to play itself out. And so here we are, right? And people are saying, oh, Regina, you just don't care about your party. No, I love my party. In fact, I think my party is really strong. And so this is why I believe we can have this conversation, because we are the party to have this conversation. If you look at the history of our party, if you examine the history of what we've done, we are the party to have this conversation, but we have lost our way in the last 50 to 60 years. We have really lost our way. And if you look at what has happened, what has transpired from the Civil Rights Act, which we just celebrated the 50th anniversary this year in 2014, the Freedom Summer, all of those, the signing of that. If you look at where civil rights are right now, we look at the militarization, the police brutality, we look at the high number of single parent households, the destruction of the education system, the total increase and disproportionate amount of Black and brown people who are in prison. I would dare say that from the civil rights to here, how did this happen? I think because the Republican Party stepped away from the plate. We were there in the beginning and we have stepped away. And now we are at this place, right, where you're turning around looking at it saying, wow, the idea of individual freedoms, of limited government, most important, right? When you look at the pictures or the video of the police choking Eric Garner in New York, when you look at some other videos that show up of young black and brown men who are handcuffed already, being choked by a police officer, white or black, you've got to sit back and say, we have now starting to come to this place where government is out of control. Government is too big. Government is taking all sorts of liberties because we, as the people who put the people in government, have stepped back from holding them accountable, have also stepped back from or stepped away from our role in controlling what our government does. It's kind of been easier to say, well, I elected you, you go ahead and take care of it. I'll see you again in November when it's time to vote. We have to stop doing that. In the communities where we are seeing this high crime, this high poverty, poor education systems, the rise of felonies, it seems like the government is just making more and more things to charge you with. When we look at the whole Second Amendment issue, if you think about why the Second Amendment was put in, right, to protect the citizens from a government if the government should ever become tyrannical, do we think that is happening right now? I definitely do agree. I think it is happening right now. And so when you stand back and you look at that and you say, okay, this is the path that we're sliding on. Like, the black community should be the canary in the tunnel. You've got to know that at some point your government is going to turn on you, right? If a dog bites you once or twice, you may have to put that dog down because it'll turn around and be dangerous to other people. We have allowed our local governments, our local elected officials, and that's not to say that there aren't good elected officials. We're not talking about individual people. We're talking about a system that constricts them, right? And there are many elected officials who know that a bill is not good for their community. Very rarely will you find them go against their party. They are left to the outskirts. They may not advance further in their party, but very rarely do you find that the community will back them. And so we have to change that. We have to begin to look at how, as a community, we start taking our government back. Because the slide that we're seeing with the police brutality, yes, lynching stopped, late 60s. And the Civil Rights Act came in, and that was supposed to really put a check on government and people and not legalize the killing of people of color. It's starting to rear its ugly head, and it probably has for many, many years. Thus, we have this high prison population, and thus, we are now handcuffing and arresting children in school for what used to be just juvenile behavior. Now you get arrested for. We can change this with the principles that I believe exist within the Republican Party. Is the Republican Party the best party? No. Is the Democrat Party the worst party? No. But the whole idea of balance, the whole idea of accountability, the idea of being a voice for your people, the people that put you there, I think we have gotten away from that. I think we have slid backwards. And if that is so, which I believe it is, this is what we're seeing, right? When you look at communities who seem to be just left abandoned, you don't see accountable government. You don't see limited government in those communities. Government controls a whole bunch of things. There are systems that control a whole bunch of things. We need to, as a community, take that back. And so Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives was started for the reason of bringing conservative messaging, helping to build a stronger party so that I could help my community, so that we could help our community, so that we could bring accountability to elected officials. After this wave, right, of the 2014 and what specifically happened in Connecticut, and you know what, you can juxtapose that to other places, other states where Republican governors won, in Democratic states, the various accounts of an increase of the black vote amongst and within the Republican Party and for Republican candidates. Those communities had strong ground games. Those states and communities had strong Black conservative Republican organizations like the Frederick Douglass Foundation, like local PACs, like the Black Conservatives Fund, that were there speaking with, building relationships. We do not have that here in Connecticut. Our C-BRAC tried to have that here, and that was totally sidelined by two people. We can't, as a party, we cannot allow that to happen. And so, having seen that, realize that maybe, just maybe, there's really a need to create an institution like what we're going to form, the Civil Rights Institution, that can not only just produce the papers on policy that are very, very relevant and speak to the cultural needs of people of color, but have conservative principles, and then go the next step of making sure that they are best practices for implementing those policies. That's important. It's not enough just to write the paper and then travel around the state talking about this great paper that you wrote and having forums on the great paper that you wrote. It's got to be that you can take those policies, implement them in a community, find out what works, what doesn't work, and then go back to the drawing board and come back again with something better. I believe that that is a way that is going to lead to turning around our urban communities, and I believe that will not happen without a strong Republican Party. So I'm Regina Roundtree with Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Welcome on this Monday morning, January 20th, 2014. I want to thank everybody for coming out and supporting us. My name is Regina Roundtree, and I am the founder of Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives. A little bit of history on how this organization came to be, and what we intend to do going forward. It started with a passion that I had for working in my community. I have done that for the past 15 years. It just so happened that I wrote a grant for teen pregnancy prevention in Hartford. I don't know if you remember that, in 2010. They won $4.5 million from the CDC. I was the agency that wrote that. And over the next year and a half after that grant was awarded, there were a lot of problems with the money actually coming down into the community. And I was very concerned, and so I started reaching out to the people that were in leadership within the city, and I couldn't get anybody to listen or to help or to be concerned that there were $900,000 a year coming into that city, and we couldn't see the programs, we couldn't see the work. It required that you reached 800 kids every year, but nothing was really happening. And that's when I realized that I really needed to do something. And so as I sat back and looked at the situation, I realized that it was a one-party town. Now, I've always been a Democrat ever since I first registered to Democrat. Oh my. Okay, don't shoot me for that one. I have always been a Republican since the first time I registered to vote back in the late 1990s. And what I realized is that it was a one-party town. There wasn't a balance of power within the inner city. And as I looked around at other inner cities across our state that were suffering through economic decline, I realized that it was a one-party system. And how could we bring accountability to those communities if there wasn't a balance of power? And that's when I started thinking about how do we reach out to our urban communities? At that time, good timing, the Growth and Opportunity Report came out from the Republican National Committee. And I realized that here is an idea. Here's some platforms and strategies that could be synthesized at the local level to really reach out to the urban communities. And so that's what I started to do. And I will say that it's very hard to find Republicans of color in Connecticut. It's like an underground railroad. I would go and talk to someone, and they would be, oh, I know a black Republican in that town over there. Why don't you call that person? And so I would call that person, or I would go over there and I would meet another Republican of color. And so standing behind me, you see a few of them that could make it today. There are many more, so I don't want you to think that this is it. There are quite a few of us in the state. And I think by forming this organization and putting it together, what I've been able to do is get the party excited about the opportunity to reach out to the urban community. And so the strategies for us are really about grassroots and about policy and about the people. Those are the most important things to us. And so as we move along across the state and as we build relationships within the urban communities, with our legislature, we're having the conversation about, we have some great messages, we have great strategies, we have great policy, but how is that being synthesized to the urban community? Are they really understanding? You know, and to the legislature, when we say, okay, it's taxes or it's property tax, think about the urban communities and that many of them are renters. And so how do you bring your message of understanding fiscal conservatism? How do you bring the message of limited government in a way that those in the urban community can understand it? And what do we do to encourage residents who do embrace our policies and who do understand them but feel that there's no support? And so by forming this organization, what we've been able to do is come up with a way to do outreach at the grassroots level, to look for and recruit people, residents in the urban communities to be part of the party, to work together with their community to bring a balance and accountability. And I am so grateful for all the support that I have received from everyone that I have talked to. And I want to bring to the podium now Senator McKinney, Speaker of our Senate.
Thank you, Regina. Folks, you've just seen a dynamic, exciting leader, a Republican leader, a conservative leader, and Regina and the people who are standing here today are proof positive that the Republican Party is alive and well all across the state of Connecticut. They are proof positive that the ideas of small or limited government, fiscal responsibility, freedom and personal responsibility are ideas that can sell anywhere in the state of Connecticut, regardless of who you are and where you live. You know, it's remarkable that we're here on Martin Luther King Day. Our founding fathers sacrificed all for the ideas of freedom and liberty and equality, the same ideas that Dr. King stood up and fought for. That vision is not complete, but it is alive and well, and we are the stewards of that vision. And with leaders like Regina working together, we will see that vision and that dream accomplished in the state of Connecticut. Regina, it's great to have you all here. We are a big party, we're a good party, and we're going to show the people of the state of Connecticut that limited government, fiscal responsibility can lift up and people who need help, who need work, can have better lives because of those ideas. Thank you, Regina.
So we were going to take a few questions if anyone had some questions they wanted to ask. task. If not, we will step out of the way and allow the setup to happen for the MLK celebration.
You talk about the outreach that you're doing in the urban areas. Is that ongoing?
Yes. So the outreach in the urban areas will be ongoing. It's every day, every year. And I know that this happens to be an election year and a big one, but we will be here in 2014, 15, and 16. It's going to take a long time to build trust. It's going to take a long time to make inroads into the urban communities and talk to them about the opportunities within the party and the platform. And so some of the strategies that we have set forth will be that we will target certain urban communities across the state. Right now, we are looking at around 10 of them: Hartford, Bloomfield, Windsor, Norwich, New London, Meriden, New Britain, New Haven, Waterbury, and Bridgeport are the target cities, at least for this year, where we're looking to, and we have identified team captains in those cities. We will be attending Board of Ed meetings, town hall meetings, community functions, talking about the platform, engaging with the community, and finding out what are the issues and the needs that they have that as a party we can support and that we can help them address. We will be also doing this after November 5th, so not just up until then. After November 5th in 2015, 16, and beyond. It's going to take quite a long time. We look for opportunities to partner with our Democratic leadership in those towns. We need a balanced two-party system. It's not about one party. It's about giving people in those communities an option and a choice.
How many members do you have, and is there any place that has become a base where you have perhaps a little bit more political clout than any place else?
Unfortunately, and all of us know that it's hard to get clout in the inner cities for the Republicans. And it's something that we're working on. We don't have a particular city that's a base for us. I think those are the things that will start to show themselves, let's say, by the summertime. This really is a brand new initiative. There's just been a lot of conversation. There isn't membership per se. Anyone who is a Republican is welcome to the meetings. We haven't started having them yet to talk about policy, but those are some of the things that I'll be working closely. Senator McCain has been gracious enough to really make his office available to us to have those kind of conversations. So as we start to have our platform and our strategies, those will roll out. You can find those, will be posted on our Facebook and also on our website.
Well, do you have any sense that your message may be more better received in some places than others? For example, Bloomfield, a great deal of economic diversity within the Black community as opposed to some of the inner cities. Is this a place you think that you may have a better shot at selling the public message within the Black community?
And again, I'm going to go back and say I don't think so, because there are many aspects of the party message that apply liberally to everybody. And so, yes, in Bloomfield we have a lot of home ownership, so property taxes, those type of things are going to be very important to them. However, in Hartford there's a real struggle with education. And the party has always been very supportive of school choice, of vouchers, of a better way to allow our children to have access to the education that they need. So it's not that one area of the state has a better propensity to be open to this message. I think everyone will. It's about how we can make the inroads. And some communities are going to be harder than others.
Are you doing any outreach to churches and other long-standing community organizations where political people like to go to reach out to the community?
The first part of your question again?
Are you reaching out to any community institutions? Are you trying to work your message through them, whether it be churches, which obviously in some communities are a very important part of Black community?
Yes. And so the part of the outreach that will happen definitely to the faith community. We talk about the platform, we talk about conservatism, but also understanding that the faith community has been the bedrock of many urban communities as far as where people go when they need help. And so one of the first outreaches and the first ideas we need to have with the faith community is to understand that in order to have accountability among your elected officials, we really need to have balance. And so that means just having some basic civic education and talking about how do you get involved in the policies that are happening within your town. And so yes, we will definitely be going to the faith base, and they'll probably be one of the stronger bases for us that we find across the state.
Are you using any particular issues to try to say, look, this is an area in which the Republican Party may have a better message for you as a voter as opposed to the Democratic Party? You know, you've been friendly with the Democratic Party for generations.
I think that with the policies, we could put some out there, but what I hesitate in doing is coming with a message that we know what you need. And I'd like to take that opportunity to go into the communities and have them speak with us. So we will be having town hall meetings, community conversations, but the first two will definitely be education, and then definitely talking about jobs and job training. With education, we all have heard ad nauseum about charter schools, about opportunities. However, what we do miss is a catchment of the population from about 16 to 25 who drop out of school and then don't have the work skills, don't go back to get their GED, and those are the ones that we see really struggling. And so there are a lot of avenues around education that are really important to the urban community, and I think marrying that with job training and opportunities for businesses to expand will be a positive message in the urban communities.
How has this message been received by the established Republican Party leaders?
Very well. My phone rings a lot now. My emails are full. Because we understand as a party that we've ignored the urban communities, and many times it's about not knowing what to do as opposed to the idea that they don't care about the poor or that they don't care about minorities. They're not sure how to reach out, and I think for so long we have left them alone that there's just kind of this intimidation, this wall, like, oh, forget it, I can't do anything. And so I'm here, and our group is here to say, you know, we're gonna reach out and we're gonna help you bridge this conversation.
Is one of the ways you're reaching out into the community is to do some myth busting that the Republicans hate old people and eat children? And in fact, it was the Republican Party that really was the impetus for the civil rights movement and the rights of women. Everyone seems to think it's the Democrats who have protected us, and that is a myth.
So, okay, so we're not going to start a war up here in this press conference right now. So, briefly, how I will answer that is, I call that nicely voter education, right? So let's talk about the party and the platform, and comparing the platforms. I mean, people ask me, how did you become a Republican? Why did you choose that party? And it was a lot of naivety. I went to the websites, I looked at both party platforms. I wasn't really cared about the people so much, right? Because people will win and lose office. I wanted to know what your platform was. And the platform for the party spoke to me. And I think what has happened is we've not been able to just come with a simple message of look at the platform, look at what it is. People come and go, but the platform remains the same. So I want to wrap this up because I do not want to take over the space for MLK celebration. I thank everyone so much for coming out. Again, you can go to our website or our Facebook page. Our website is www.ctbrac.org. Again, thank you everyone and have a wonderful day.